Turning to another problem, and that is cultures and multiculturalism. When I was growing up in England in the 1940s, 50s, I think never, I won't say never, but very occasionally met anyone from anywhere further than perhaps France or the near continent. The boarding school I went to, I just remember the 2 or 3 boys, one Egyptian, maybe 1 or 2 others in the 400 boys who were from some other place, maybe 1 or 2 Americans, Australians, but apart from the Commonwealth, not really. Even in the village I live in now in England, 10, 15 years ago, you hardly ever saw anyone from any other culture or far away, in other words, Africans, Indians, Chinese. Now, just as I had my breakfast, I saw some Indians walking past my breakfast window, and I know that in this little village of 600 or so people, perhaps 100 are now from Africa, India, Japan, China, and so on. And if you go to a big city, going to London, you find there are whole sub-areas. I went to North London, and there it was almost entirely Indian and Nepali, other areas are Chinese and so on. So we are now in a multicultural society, and our media are the same. If you watch television or popular culture, football, everything else, it's multicultural. Now, this is not easy for many people to accept. They feel threatened, their own identity undermined, or their jobs threatened, and it's behind a good deal of populism and nationalism. So how are we going to deal with a world which is very multicultural? Well, 2 obvious solutions. One is to increase understanding. This is being done anyway, because many of English schools anyway are filled with many languages and many cultures. How much formal teaching there is in those schools about the other cultures, I don't know, but certainly they learn that people from different parts of the world originally are not different from them in basic ways. But there is still a great deal of misunderstanding, for example, between America and Europe and China. The Europeans, Western, white sort of people often know nothing at all about how China has worked, its history, its culture, its assumptions, and it's not the same the other way around. The Chinese know a lot about the West, but if we're going to live together, we have to increase intercultural understanding. And my own discipline of anthropology was geared to that. That was its central reason for existing, understanding the other, whoever he or she was, anywhere in the world. So comparative anthropology, taught at all levels of education and encouraged on the media, would be one solution. The other is something which I've observed in relation particularly to Britain and its relatively successful imperial system. All empires, no doubt, are evil, but one of the less evil ones, I think, was the British Empire. And in that, there was a big separation made between basic things on which you have to be united. And that was basically society. That is the rules of the game in terms of politics. You have to accept a political system which governs you. And the second is the economic system. You have to accept the system of taxation and private property or property systems in order to work in a market economy. So those two things, in the English Empire case, peace and reasonable taxation and judicial system, have to be uniform, more or less, across the world, a world system of accepted political and legal and economic rules. Culture, on the other hand, that is beliefs and ideas and religions and arts and so on, the British thought were your own business. You, as long as you paid your taxes and you didn't murder people and so on, what you believed, what you ate, what you wore, and to a certain extent, even your family customs and your marriages, within reason, were your own business. So a great proliferation of variety in cultural worlds was perfectly reasonable, because all we need is to get along with people, is that we drive on the same side of the road and we pay fairly for what we buy and so on. Now that isn't entirely easy. It sounds easy, but many cultures and civilizations and many of the continental empires were based on the idea that once you were absorbed into them, you had to absorb their culture as well as their social norms. And so in the French Empire, you had to speak French and you had to go through a French kind of education and so on, which gave you more rights, but also more obligations. And if you started going against that, you were no longer French. So those are two areas which we need to pay attention to. And of course, there are many others.